Hi everybody and welcome back to another Legends of Runeterra video. We just barely got the new card reveals for the day, and it looks like we are going to be getting Shyvana tomorrow, as we've got a lot of Demacia cards, as well as a couple from Noxus. But Demacia cards, it look like we get some synergy with dragons, so I imagine Shyvana is going to be the newest champion and last for this expansion added to Legends of Runeterra. Alright, so let's look at the first card here, a 2-drop from Demacia, Egghead Researcher. When I'm summoned, create a random dragon follower in hand. So this is kind of interesting. So the other card that we have that is kind of related to these dragons is the Herald of Dragons, I believe, from Targon. Another 2-drop, 1/1. Who is reducing the cost of dragons. And that the main issue that I've had with dragons kind of the entire time is that there isn't a very early dropped kind of dragon that we can get onto the board early in order to establish dragons, right? We've kind of been very dependent on getting the Herald of the Dragon out and then having her reduce the cost so that we can get a 4-cost dragon down on turn 3 and be able to sort of play on curve these dragons in this mid-range deck. And so what I really wanted was to see more dragons early, and these reveals today don't necessarily give us that, but they do give us some way to work around dragons in general and be able to maybe make a different style of this archetype and have, supporting units that work well with the deck, and the Egghead Researcher is one of these units. You put it down, you get some value out of having this unit and kind of invest in being able to play more dragons later. I think in the archetype is going to work okay. We're going to see what cards we get tomorrow. I kind of imagine Shyvana might be a 3-drop champion dragon anyway. We'll see what happens, but that's kind of my prediction. So yeah, Egghead Researcher, 2/1/3, just seems to work pretty much exclusively in a dragon archetype. Alright, let's look at this next one here. Dragon Guard Lieutenant. When I'm summoned, if you behold a dragon, grant me Challenger. Grant me Challenger. Alright, so this is pretty similar to the Mage Seeker Persuader, I believe, who when you play a 6-cost spell, he gets +1/+1 in Challenger. So this is kind of a weaker version of that coming out on turn 2. The advantage that you get is that all you need to do is behold a dragon. And the good thing about kind of these dragons is that you're going to have your deck full of them running a dragon deck, and so there is pretty much 100% chance by the time you get Dragon Guard Lieutenant out there, he's going to be able to get the Challenger keywords. So he's got pretty decent stats. He can pretty much take out whatever card he needs to. He's kind of a buffing target as well, just because he's got Challenger and he's able to take out some pretty bulky units if he needs to. So yeah, just keep that in mind. He pretty much is always going to get Challenger if you're running him in a dragon deck. There's plenty of dragons to choose from. Yeah, and having your hand full of them shouldn't be a problem by the time you can play the Dragon Guard Lieutenant on turn 2. So I expect this guy to kind of get some use in dragon decks, but probably only dragon decks. Alright, let's look at the next card here. 2-drop Stony Suppressor. All spells cost 1 more. Now this is a really interesting card, because this kind of looks like it works in the Mage Seeker archetype, right? Where we are punishing, I guess, not really punishing, but it's kind of the archetype where we have, I guess it doesn't even work in that archetype, because those are like kind of influence use spells, whereas this one is not. But the ability is kind of what the Mage Seekers want to accomplish, which is kind of funny. But this looks like a pretty awesome card from Demacia. This card intrigues me because this could be a huge counter, and you can build around this, right? So your spells and the enemy spells are going to cost 1 more. And the kind of cool thing about that is that you can build your deck around this, but the enemy doesn't have that ability. And so if you go against a lot of kind of control-y decks with a whole bunch of spells in it, you get really good value out of this card. Excellent value. And you can run kind of a mid-range Demacia deck where you have, even like a mobilized deck would be pretty fun, where you have only 3 spells in the deck, get some extreme value out of mobilize early on, and then just play off your units on curve, and then kind of punish your enemy for using spells. So I really like this card. It's pretty cool. It's a cool concept, and I am intrigued by it, and I want to make decks around it. mid-range decks. This seems like a pretty cool card, and I kind of like what this is adding into the game. Alright, let's move on to the next one here. Sharp Sight. Burst speed, 2-cost spell, give an ally +2/+2, and I can block units with elusive this round. Alright, so both of these buffs are temporary, the elusive and the +2/+2, so you're not going to have this the next round. This seems like kind of a elusive counter, which is interesting because you get pretty good value out of it, but the problem is that you almost can only run this in an elusive meta, because otherwise you don't get a ton of value out of it. You get the +2/+2 for the round. I guess it is pretty good. Now that I'm thinking a little bit more about it, the +2/+2 is pretty good. It's a burst speed spell, so you're pretty much going to be able to block anything that you need to. This counters a lot of like the strikes from Demacia itself, which is interesting. So like the single combat concerted strike, this counters Make It Rain, this counters Battle Feast, Withering Well, and it only costs 2 mana. This is a pretty good card, and on top of that, if you're going against an elusive deck, and if elusive is a very heavy sort of deck in the current meta, this is going to be an excellent card. Yeah, so compare this to something like Fury of the North, right? Fury of the North is a 4-cost. It was 4/3, and now or a 4/4, and now it's a 3/4. This costs half as much. Still burst speed spell. You get +2/+2. So like if you're looking at this equally with Fury of the North, it's on par with that before it was nerfed, and it can block elusive. So this is, I think, is actually a very powerful card. A very powerful card. Yeah, and burst speed just is awesome. You can protect your units from a lot of things. Alright, I'm actually a pretty big fan of this card. And just, yeah, they're adding more cards into Demacia that kind of can tech against metas. So the Stony Suppressor one and Sharp Sight is a second. Alright, let's go on to actually the Stalking Broodmother first, just because it's from Demacia still. This is a 7-drop dragon with Fury and Scout. I wanted to see them add more Scout units into the game. The Scout mechanic is pretty interesting, but it, I think, is kind of linear. Adding more units with Scout is interesting. However, it is a 7-cost dragon, so you do have to take that into account. So an equivalent card is Genevieve Elmhart, just because it's also Scout and has Challenger, so kind of a similar stat line as well. She buffs your other units. The dragon is coming out as a 6/6, and has Fury, has Scout. If you are running it in a typical dragon deck with something like Herald of the Dragons, then you can get this out on turn 6, so it is more and more like Genevieve Elmhart. I just don't think that its stats and its mana cost warrant putting it into a deck over that unit, though. I'll be kind of interested to see what we have tomorrow. Otherwise, this is kind of a vanilla statted card, and I don't really see this being any more like included into decks besides the like over the dragons that we already have. Inviola's Bow and the Mind Splitter. I think the Inviola's Bow is 6 and the Mind Splitter is an 8-cost. But like, what does this replace with those two cards, right? Not much. It has Scout, which would kind of influence you to put this into a Scout deck with Quinn, but this card isn't as good as Genevieve Elmhart, or probably even like Cytherea the Bold, so I don't really see this card getting a lot of use. Could be wrong about that, but it just seems too generic, and there's other cards that do the same things it does, but better. Alright, let's go back to Scorched Earth. This is a fast speed spell from Noxus, 3-cost, kill a damaged unit or destroy a landmark. So this is what I was kind of expecting to have happen here. They're going to be including more cards that can deal with landmarks. Kill a damaged unit or destroy a landmark. So this is kind of like Divergent Paths, where we can either draw a landmark or destroy a landmark. This is giving us a second option here to kill a damaged unit or destroy a landmark. So this is kind of like a Noxian Guillotine, right, where you can kill a unit if it is damaged. So this looks like the enemy can interact with it because this is a burst speed spell. They can heal their unit so that you can't kill it, but you can't heal a landmark. It looks like it will go through and destroy the landmark unless they have some way to deny it with Deny or Notify, something like that. This seems like an okay tech card if there are a lot of landmarks going around in the meta and you need to get rid of them. Yeah, I don't see it being any better than Then Nox and Guillotine. The damage or kill a damage unit is just there, so you get value out of it if you include it into the deck, and it doesn't feel awful to include it. Alright, let's go on to the Noxkraya Arena, or Noxkraya, one of the two. 5-drop landmark. This is the Noxus landmark. Round end, your strongest ally and your weakest enemy strike each other. Yeah, this is pretty interesting. This is something you're going to have to work around, though, and it might take some practice to actually get used to, because this kind of affects your attack and defense phases, right? Because depending on which units you have alive, which units survive the attack and defending phases will determine which ones are going to be attacking here. So what if you have your strongest ally is a 1-2 and the weakest enemy is a 5-5 at the end, right? Then you're just going to kind of suicide your units. So yeah, this could take some getting used to. There are definitely ways to build around this deck with Noxus. A lot of the Trifarian units are very powerful, and they come in at relatively low mana because they usually have some sort of hindrance, right? They can't block, something like that, but they have very good stats. And so this could fit very well with a Trifarian deck. I also see it working possibly with a Garen deck, because Garen will level up once you strike twice. He also has regeneration. So there's not a whole lot of downside of having your Garen attack like another unit and leveling up faster with this arena card. It will be interesting to kind of work around. I kind of like the concept, but you do definitely need to build a deck carefully around this, and also you're going to have to use your attack and defense phase very carefully when you have this card out. Yeah, it does kind of introduce an interesting sort of psychological component to the game, and it forces your enemy to do things and act in ways that they might not necessarily want to, which is something that I enjoy in this card game. Alright, yeah, so that's about it. We'll probably see Shyvana tomorrow. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and we will see you tomorrow. Thanks.